Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights and drift back in time. Not to a gilded palace, but to the very hearth of what was considered the bedrock of ancient society, the Roman family. Forget the romanticized images of toga-clad senators and grand feasts. Tonight, we're slipping behind the heavy wooden doors of a Roman domus, right into the heart of the awful reality of family life in ancient Rome. You might think your family has its quirks, or that raising kids today is tough. But trust me, after tonight, you'll be incredibly grateful for modern family dynamics. You'll probably decide you wouldn't survive 5 minutes under the watchful eye of a Roman patriarch. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself waking up, not to the gentle sunlight filtering through your blinds in a quiet suburban home in Portland, Oregon, but to the stern, unyielding gaze of the paterfamilias. This isn't just your father, this is the undisputed, absolute lord of the household. His word isn't just law, it's a force of nature, shaping every breath drawn, every decision made, every hope nurtured within the family unit. This isn't just about respect, it's about a power so vast, so encompassing, that it might make the most autocratic CEO in Silicon Valley blush. This is the pervasive, all-consuming reality of the patriarch's iron hand absolute power, where your very existence, your identity, your fate, and even your life itself lay entirely at the whim of one man. From the moment you were born into a Roman family, whether in a grand villa overlooking the Bay of Naples, or a humble dwelling in the bustling heart of Rome, or, to give it an American context, imagine it in a nascent colonial settlement like Jamestown, Virginia, where patriarchal authority was strong, but not nearly as absolute or a strict religious communal society in colonial Massachusetts. Your life was not your own. If you were a newborn, your fate was decided at the recognition ceremony. The baby, freshly washed, would be placed at the feet of the paterfamilias. If he lifted you, you were acknowledged, accepted into the family. If he left you on the ground, you were exposed, left to die or to be picked up by strangers and raised as a slave. This wasn't a rare occurrence, it was a recognized legal practice, especially for girls or children born with deformities. Your very right to live, to breathe, to exist, hinged on this one man's decision. It's a truly chilling thought, especially for anyone living in a modern American city like Dallas. Texas, where a child's right to life is considered fundamental from birth, once accepted, you entered a world governed by the patria potestas, the father's power. This wasn't just influence, it was a legal right over his children, his grandchildren, and anyone else brought into his household. Including slaves, a topic we'll explore in agonizing detail in a later chapter. This power extended throughout your entire life, regardless of your age, your achievements, or your marital status. You could be a decorated general, a brilliant orator, or a revered priest. But as long as your paterfamilias lived, you were legally considered a minor, unable to own property independently, make contracts, or even marry without his consent. He could demand your obedience, decide your career, arrange your marriage, and even punish you with imprisonment, exile, or death, all within the bounds of Roman law. This wasn't a historical oddity, it was the foundation of Roman social order, a stark contrast to the modern American ideal of individual autonomy. Consider the economic implications. As a son, you could acquire wealth through your military service or public office. But legally, that wealth belonged to your paterfamilias. He had full control over it, could dispose of it as he saw fit, and upon his death, it would become part of the family inheritance, to be distributed according to his will. Imagine working your entire life, building a successful career, accumulating significant assets in a bustling metropolis like Chicago, Illinois, only to know that none of it is truly yours, and your father could, at any moment, seize it or squander it. This complete lack of financial independence was a constant reminder of your subordinate status. A stark contrast to the financial freedoms enjoyed by young adults in modern American society. A common historical truth is that the Roman paterfamilias wielded extraordinary legal power, known as patria potestas, over his household, including his children regardless of age, wife, and slaves. This authority encompassed legal, economic, and even life and death control, shaping every aspect of family life. Historians still widely debate the practical extent to which patria potestas was exercised in everyday Roman life, with some arguing that social customs and informal pressures often tempered its most extreme applications, while others emphasize its undeniable legal foundation and the psychological impact of such absolute power. This absolute power extended even to your love life. Marriage, particularly for daughters, was almost exclusively an arrangement made by the paterfamilias, often for political or economic gain, with little to no input from the bride or groom. He chose your spouse, negotiated the dowry, and orchestrated the ceremony. Your personal feelings, your affections, were irrelevant. Even as a grown man, if you wished to marry, you needed your father's consent. If he disapproved or saw a better match, your wishes were simply overridden. This control over marriage, a fundamental aspect of personal freedom in modern society, highlights the patriarchal grip on every facet of life. It's like having your entire romantic future pre-programmed by your parents, with no opportunity for deviation. A nightmare scenario for any young person in a vibrant city like San Francisco. California, the legal standing of women under patria potestas was particularly tenuous. While a wife would pass from the patria potestas of her own father to that of her husband, or more commonly in later periods, remain under her father's authority but live in her husband's home. She was never truly independent. Her legal and financial rights were almost always mediated by a male guardian. She could not initiate legal proceedings, conduct business, or dispose of property without male consent. Her primary role was to manage the household and bear legitimate children, ensuring the continuation of the family line and the father's legacy. This stark limitation on female autonomy, even for wealthy Roman matrons, paints a grim picture of domestic life. It's like living in a gilded cage, where comfort might exist, but true freedom is perpetually out of reach, far more restrictive than even the most traditional family dynamics in parts of rural Alabama today. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about the patriarch's iron hand. Absolute power is the curious phenomenon of the secret domestic court, where, in wealthier Roman households, a particularly cunning or frustrated paterfamilias, the mother of the family, while legally subordinate to her husband, would sometimes establish an unspoken, informal court among the household slaves and freedmen, using gossip, subtle manipulation, and controlled information to exert a significant, albeit hidden, influence over domestic affairs and even her husband's public decisions, turning her legal powerlessness into a surprising source of behind-the-scenes authority. A silent rebellion within the patriarchal structure? Imagine yourself, the seemingly demure wife of a powerful Roman senator in his opulent villa, subtly orchestrating the flow of information among your hundreds of slaves, ensuring that certain rumors reach your husband's ear, or that particular requests are subtly framed. Turning your domestic domain into a quiet battlefield where your hidden influence shaped the very fabric of daily life, a truly fascinating and subversive act. It truly sucked to be legally powerless to the point where your only avenue for influence was through cunning. Silent manipulation and backroom dealings, turning your own home into a web of unspoken power plays, even in death. The paterfamilias maintained control. His will, once declared, was absolute. He could disinherit a child, designate an outsider as his heir, or dictate the future of his property. While Roman law did introduce some provisions to prevent total disinheritance, the father's power to shape the future of his family, even from the grave, was profound. your inheritance, your social standing after his death, your very reputation, all rested on his final decree. This concept of posthumous control is a stark reminder of the enduring nature of patria potestas, extending even beyond the physical realm, far more controlling than any inheritance dispute you might witness in a modern American courtroom. The psychological impact of living under such absolute authority was immense. Children grew up knowing their every action, every thought, was subject to their father's approval. This could foster obedience, but also deep resentment, fear, and a stifling of individuality. Sons might spend decades waiting for their father to die to finally become sui juris their own master, their lives effectively on hold until then. The pressure to conform, to please, to avoid punishment was constant. There was little room for true self-expression or independent thought, as dissent could lead to severe consequences. The very fabric of your personality was shaped by the need to navigate this powerful, often unpredictable familial authority. The Roman legal system, rather than curbing the paterfamilias power, largely reinforced it. Roman law viewed the family as the fundamental unit of society, and the father's authority as essential to maintain order. While there were some checks and balances, particularly in later periods of Roman history, the core principle of patria potestas remained largely intact for centuries, a testament to its deeply embedded nature in Roman culture and law. This legal bedrock made any form of overt rebellion incredibly dangerous and largely futile. The constant external threat of warfare, political instability, and social upheaval, so common in ancient Rome, often strengthened the paterfamilias' hand as a strong, unified family under a singular authority was seen as crucial for survival. In a world fraught with peril, the father was the ultimate protector, the decision-maker who ensured the family's continuity. This practical necessity, combined with tradition and law, cemented his position, making it incredibly difficult for individuals to challenge his authority. A dynamic that would be completely alien to a modern family enjoying a quiet evening in suburban Arizona. Where individual rights are paramount, the legacy of the patriarch's iron hand. Absolute power is a chilling reminder of how profoundly different family structures can be across cultures and historical periods. It highlights the vast disparities in individual autonomy and freedom that existed, and how deeply ingrained societal norms can dictate the most personal aspects of human life. This historical reality underscores the immense value of the individual freedoms we enjoy today. The right to choose our own paths, to own our own property, to marry for love, and to shape our own destinies. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps in a home where every member has a voice, remember the silent, unyielding grip of the Roman paterfamilias, and appreciate the hard-won evolution of family life that allows you to be truly sui juris, your own master. Let's gently return from the formidable, all-encompassing grip of the patriarch's iron hand absolute power, where every individual within the Roman family was bound by the unyielding will of the paterfamilias. If Chapter 1 explored the overarching authority that dictated their lives, tonight we'll delve into the earliest, most formative years of a Roman's existence, childhood. We're going to explore the stark and often brutal reality of childhood's harsh-dawn early discipline, contemplating how deeply different and unforgiving Roman childhood was, from the moment of birth to the rigid educational path, where the concept of a carefree, protected youth, as we understand it, was a distant, unattainable luxury. Imagine yourself, now a tiny, squalling infant, not nestled safely in a hospital bassinet in a modern American suburb of Seattle. Washington, but placed on the cold floor at the feet of your father in a Roman domus, or for an American context. Think of the precarious beginnings in a rugged, early colonial log cabin in the wilderness of Kentucky, where survival was always uncertain. Your very first moments of life are fraught with peril, a test of your worth. As we touched upon briefly in Chapter 1, the paterfamilias had the legal right to decide if you would live or die. If he lifted you, you were accepted. If he did not, you were exposed, left to the elements or to the mercy of strangers, often to be raised as slaves or simply perish. This wasn't a rare anomaly, it was a societal norm, particularly if you were a girl or if your family already had too many mouths to feed, or if you were born with a physical disability. The sheer vulnerability of a newborn, completely dependent on one man's decree, is a chilling reminder of the fragility of life in ancient Rome. A far cry from the modern concept of universal human rights from birth. If you survived infancy, the next challenge was simply staying alive. Childhood mortality rates in ancient Rome were astronomically high. Diseases that are easily treatable today, like measles, mumps, or even a bad cold, could sweep through a household and claim young lives with terrifying speed. There were no vaccines, no antibiotics, no modern pediatric care like the advanced hospitals you might find in a bustling city like New York City. You were lucky if you made it past the age of 5. Imagine growing up in a world where the death of a sibling, or even multiple siblings, was a common, almost expected occurrence. A constant shadow hanging over every cradle. Parents, while undoubtedly feeling grief, often had to adopt a pragmatic detachment to cope with the almost inevitable loss. A coping mechanism that would be unimaginable for parents in contemporary America. Once you were old enough to walk and talk, the rigorous discipline began. Unlike modern American parenting, which often emphasizes nurturing and emotional development, Roman upbringing was geared towards instilling obedience, duty, and resilience. Physical punishment was common and widely accepted, seen as a necessary tool to mold character. Disobedience, laziness, or even simple childish mischief could be met with a swift and painful lesson. There was no concept of timeouts or gentle parenting like the approaches advocated by modern child psychologists in a peaceful suburb of Portland. Oregon? You were expected to be seen and not heard, to learn quickly, and to internalize the rigid social rules of your family in Roman society. A common historical truth is that childhood in ancient Rome was characterized by high mortality rates, strict discipline, and an early emphasis on duty and practical skills rather than prolonged periods of carefree play. Children, particularly boys, were integrated into adult societal roles at a relatively young age. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological impact of such a harsh upbringing on Roman children, as direct personal accounts are scarce, leading to interpretations based primarily on prescriptive texts and anecdotal evidence. Education, for those who received it, primarily boys from wealthier families, was also incredibly demanding. It wasn't about exploring your passions or finding your unique talents. Instead, it was focused on practical skills. Reading, writing, rhetoric for boys who would enter public life, and arithmetic. Girls, even in wealthier families, received a more domestic education, focused on household management, spinning and weaving, preparing them for their roles as future paterfamilias. Learning was often rote, repetitive, and reinforced by strict discipline, sometimes even physical beatings from tutors. Imagine sitting for hours, painstakingly copying texts or memorizing speeches, knowing that any mistake could bring the wrath of your tutor, or worse, your father. It's a far cry from the interactive, child-centered learning environments of today's American elementary schools. Play, as we understand it, spontaneous, unstructured, and for pure enjoyment, was limited. While Roman children did have toys dolls, balls, miniature chariots, their childhood was often punctuated by chores and early responsibilities. Boys from poorer families would be expected to contribute to the family's livelihood from a young age, perhaps helping in the fields or assisting in a workshop. Even wealthy boys, while not engaged in manual labor, were constantly groomed for their future roles in public life, their days filled with study, physical exercise, and military training. The concept of an extended, carefree adolescence, so common in modern American society, simply did not exist. By their mid to late teens, many Roman boys were considered adults, ready for marriage, military service, or public office, carrying the heavy burdens of responsibility years before their modern counterparts would even consider leaving home. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about childhood's harsh-dawn early discipline is the curious phenomenon of the amulet of silent tears, where, for Roman children, particularly those suffering from chronic illness or severe discipline, a small, often unremarkable clay or lead amulet, secretly worn or hidden, became a personal, unspoken receptacle for their private fears and sorrows. A silent, superstitious act of burying their emotional burdens in a world where open displays of vulnerability were discouraged. Turning a mundane object into a profound symbol of their suppressed childhood pain, imagine yourself, a small Roman child in a crowded insula apartment building in the bustling Subura district of Rome, clutching a tiny, rough-hewn clay amulet beneath your tunic, your eyes brimming with silent tears after a harsh lesson or a bout of fever, whispering your fears into the cold clay, hoping it would absorb your misery. A truly poignant act of solitary emotional processing in a world that offered little comfort or understanding. It truly sucked to have to find such a hidden, superstitious way to cope with your suffering, where your only confidant was a piece of clay. The psychological impact of such an upbringing was profound. Children learned to suppress their emotions, to endure hardship, and to prioritize duty over personal desires. They were taught to be stoic, resilient, and obedient, qualities considered essential for Roman citizens. While this undoubtedly produced strong, disciplined individuals, it also likely fostered a deep-seated fear of authority, a reluctance to express individuality, and a pervasive sense of anxiety. The pressure to conform, to live up to the strict expectations of the paterfamilias in Roman society, would have been immense. It's a far cry from the emphasis on emotional intelligence and self-expression that is so valued in modern Western parenting. Even the rituals surrounding childhood were steeped in formality. The naming ceremony, the presentation of the bulla, a protective amulet worn by boys until adulthood, and the toga virilis ceremony marking a boy's transition to manhood were all formal. Public events emphasizing duty, tradition, and the child's integration into the larger fabric of Roman society. These weren't informal celebrations of individuality, but rather rites of passage reinforcing their societal roles and expectations. The social and economic status of the family also profoundly shaped a child's experience. For children of slaves, or those exposed and rescued into slavery, childhood was an even more brutal reality, often involving hard labor, deprivation, and sexual exploitation. For children of the wealthiest elite, life might have involved more comforts and tutors, but it still came with immense pressure to excel, to uphold the family name, and to secure advantageous marriages or political careers. Regardless of social standing, the fundamental principles of strict discipline, early responsibility, and paternal authority permeated Roman childhood. The constant external pressures of Roman society, the emphasis on military prowess, political ambition, and maintaining social status also filtered down into the upbringing of children. Boys were groomed to be future soldiers and citizens, girls to be efficient homemakers and mothers of future Romans. There was little room for deviation from these prescribed paths, little encouragement for exploring unconventional interests or challenging established norms. Your role was predetermined, and your childhood was a rigorous training ground to prepare you for it. The legacy of childhood's harsh dawn early discipline is a powerful reminder of the stark differences in historical approaches to raising children. It highlights the immense value we now place on childhood as a protected period of development, the importance of nurturing emotional well-being, and the fundamental rights of children. This historical reality underscores the hard-won progress in child welfare, education, and public health that we largely take for granted today. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps with the quiet comfort of your own children sleeping soundly nearby, remember the rigorous, often unforgiving childhoods of ancient Rome, and appreciate the profound evolution of what it means to be a child. Let's gently return from the strict, often unforgiving, world of childhood's harsh dawn early discipline, where Roman children were molded into obedient, duty-bound citizens from their earliest days. If Chapter 2 explored the rigorous upbringing of the young, tonight we'll shift our gaze to the figure at the heart of the Roman household, yet one whose life was often defined by constraints and societal expectations, the Roman woman. We're going to explore the quiet, often unacknowledged struggles of matron's silent burden women's limited role. Contemplating how, even as mistress of a grand domus, a Roman woman's autonomy was severely restricted, and her worth was largely defined by her ability to manage a household and produce heirs. Turning her domestic domain into a gilded cage, imagine yourself now, a Roman woman, not bustling through the streets of modern Boston, Massachusetts, asserting your independence, but confined largely within the walls of your stately domus in ancient Rome, or to ground it in an American context. Think of the refined but equally restrictive lives of wealthy women in the early American South, managing vast plantations with little personal freedom beyond their domestic sphere, or even the stringent social expectations placed on women in 19th century New England, where a woman's place was firmly in the home. Your every movement, your every decision, is often governed by the unseen hand of patriarchal authority. You are the paterfamilias, the mother of the family, a title of immense respect and responsibility within the household. Yet your legal standing, your economic power, and your social influence rarely extended beyond the domestic sphere. This is the pervasive, often frustrating reality of matron's silent burden. Women's limited role in where your sphere of influence might be grand within your home, but your voice outside of it was often muted, and your legal rights were almost non-existent. From birth, a Roman girl's destiny was largely predetermined. Unlike her brother, one who might be groomed for military service or a political career, her path led almost inevitably to marriage and motherhood. Education for girls, even in wealthy families, was focused on skills essential for running a large household. Spinning, weaving, managing slaves, overseeing provisions, and perhaps basic literacy and arithmetic to keep accounts. There was no concept of higher education or professional careers for women, as we understand them today in, say, a bustling modern university town like Austin, Texas. Your intellectual development, if pursued at all, was primarily for personal enrichment, not for public acclaim or independent gain. Marriage was the central event of a Roman woman's life, and it was rarely a matter of personal choice. As we briefly touched upon in Chapter 1, it was almost always an arrangement made by her paterfamilias, often for strategic alliances, political leverage, or economic benefit. Love, while it might develop within the marriage, was not a prerequisite. You could be betrothed as a child and married in your early teens, passing from the legal control of your father to that of your husband, though by the late Republic and early Empire. Marriages sine manu, without hand, became more common, meaning the wife remained legally under her father's authority, giving her a bit more independence if her father allowed it. Imagine having your entire future, your entire identity, tied to a contractual agreement between two families, with your personal feelings largely irrelevant, a stark contrast to the romantic ideals of marriage prevalent in modern American society. A common historical truth is that Roman women, regardless of their social class, generally operated within a patriarchal system where their legal rights were limited, and their primary roles were defined by marriage, motherhood, and household management. While the paterfamilias held significant social authority within her home, her public influence and legal autonomy were constrained. Historians still widely debate the true extent of Roman women's social and economic influence in practice, with some arguing that informal networks and household power dynamics allowed women to wield considerable, albeit unacknowledged, authority, while others emphasized the pervasive legal and societal restrictions that fundamentally limited their freedom. Once married, your primary duty was to manage the household and, crucially, to produce legitimate children, especially sons, to ensure the continuation of your husband's family line and the preservation of his dreams of legacy. a concept we explored in Chapter 9, but here seen from a woman's perspective, where her body was a vessel for that legacy. Barrenness was a grave misfortune and could even be grounds for divorce. Bearing healthy children, especially boys, secured your position and enhanced your status within the family. It was a constant pressure, a biological imperative that defined your worth more than any personal accomplishment. This constant expectation, this biological imperative, was a pervasive burden, far more intense than any modern societal pressure to start a family in a bustling city like Seattle. Washington, while a Roman woman might manage a vast household, overseeing dozens or even hundreds of slaves, a reality we'll delve into in Chapter 5. Her property rights were often tenuous. In marriage cum manu with hand, all her property became her husband's. In son manu marriages, she retained some control over her dowry and any inherited property, but she typically needed a male guardian to conduct any significant financial transactions. She could not initiate legal proceedings, make contracts, or dispose of large sums of money without male consent. This lack of financial independence meant that even wealthy women were rarely truly autonomous, always needing a male intermediary to navigate the legal and economic world. It's like having a vast fortune but needing permission from your male relatives to buy a simple item. A frustrating limitation, unimaginable for a financially independent woman in modern New York City. Socially, a Roman woman's life was largely confined to the domestic sphere. While aristocratic women might attend public games, theater, or banquets, their participation was often limited and always under the watchful eye of male family members. Engaging in politics, practicing law, or pursuing a public career was generally unheard of. Your reputation, your dignitas, was inextricably linked to the honor of your family and your husband. Any scandal, any perceived impropriety, could bring shame not only upon yourself but upon the entire family, limiting your public interactions and reinforcing the need for constant decorum. It's like living under perpetual scrutiny where every step is judged, and any misstep can have devastating consequences for your entire family's reputation. A pressure far greater than any celebrity in modern Hollywood might face. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about matron's silent burden. Women's limited role as the curious phenomenon of the paterfamilias' hidden library, where, in wealthier Roman households, a particularly intellectual or rebellious paterfamilias, while publicly adhering to domestic roles, would secretly cultivate a private collection of philosophical texts. Greek literature, or even subversive political writings, often hidden away in a secluded corner of the domus or accessible only through trusted slaves. Turning her intellectual curiosity into a private act of defiance against societal expectations and a hidden wellspring of personal freedom within her otherwise constrained life. Imagine yourself, the dignified wife of a powerful Roman senator, secretly reading Plato or Sappho by candlelight long after your husband has retired. Your mind soaring beyond the domestic duties of the day, finding solace and intellectual liberation in forbidden texts. A truly poignant act of internal rebellion against the limitations imposed upon you. It truly sucked to have to hide your own intellectual pursuits, where even reading certain books was a private, subversive act. Making your own home a secret haven for forbidden thoughts. Emotional expression, particularly public displays of strong emotion, was often discouraged. A Roman matron was expected to be dignified, modest, and composed. While lamentations were part of funeral rites, and joy was expressed at celebrations, excessive displays of anger, grief, or even passion were generally frowned upon, seen as a sign of weakness or lack of self-control. This constant need for emotional restraint, for maintaining a stoic facade, was another burden that weighed heavily on Roman women. Perhaps contributing to the perpetual exhaustion we discussed in Chapter 7, but here on an emotional, rather than purely physical level, it's like living with an invisible muzzle on your feelings, constantly having to filter your true self to fit into societal expectations. A pressure that would lead to immense psychological distress in modern therapeutic contexts. Despite these limitations, Roman women often wielded significant informal power within their households. They managed vast staffs of slaves, controlled household finances, albeit often through a male guardian, and supervised the upbringing of their children. They could influence their husbands and sons through subtle persuasion, advice, and social networking among other elite women. This behind-the-scenes influence, while rarely acknowledged publicly, was a crucial aspect of their daily lives, allowing them to shape events in ways that defied their legal powerlessness. It's a delicate dance, a constant negotiation of power within a restrictive framework, far more nuanced than simply being a decision-maker in a modern family. The social class of a Roman woman heavily influenced her lived experience. While aristocratic women faced rigid expectations of decorum and reproduction for dynastic purposes, they also enjoyed greater comforts and access to education than their poorer counterparts. Women from the lower classes might have more practical freedoms, often working outside the home in shops, markets, or as wet nurses. But they also faced greater economic hardship and social vulnerability. Slave women, of course, endured the most brutal existence, stripped of all rights and often subjected to sexual exploitation, a harsh reality that underscores the extreme disparities within Roman society. The legacy of matron's silent burden. Women's limited role is a powerful reminder of how gender roles and societal expectations have shaped human experience throughout history. It highlights the vast advancements in women's rights, autonomy, and opportunities that we enjoy today, from education and career choices to financial independence and the freedom to marry for love. This historical reality underscores the hard-won battles for gender equality, reminding us that the freedoms we often take for granted were once unimaginable luxuries. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps celebrating your own autonomy and choices, remember the quiet strength and resilience of the Roman matron, confined by custom and law, yet often finding ways to assert her dignity and influence within the silent walls of her domus. Let's gently return from the constrained world of matron's silent burden women's limited role, where the Roman woman, for all her domestic power, still navigated a life circumscribed by patriarchal norms. If Chapter 3 explored the boundaries of her existence, tonight we'll delve into an institution that was fundamental to Roman society, yet one often devoid of romance and personal choice marriage. We're going to explore the stark, pragmatic reality of marriage as contract love's absence, contemplating how, for many Romans, especially the elite, marriage was less about personal affection and more about strategic alliances, economic transactions, and the continuation of the family line, turning a sacred bond into a carefully calculated arrangement. Imagine yourself now, a young Roman noble, perhaps barely out of your teens, not excitedly planning a dream wedding in a charming venue in Napa Valley, California, but instead standing before your paterfamilias. Remember his absolute power from Chapter 1, listening intently as he discusses the terms of your upcoming marriage. This isn't a conversation about shared dreams or personal compatibility. It's a dry negotiation of dowries, political advantages, and family reputations. Your future spouse, whom you may barely know, is simply another chess piece in a larger game of social climbing and dynastic continuity. This is the pervasive, often emotionally sterile reality of marriage as contract love's absence, where the heart was rarely consulted, and personal happiness often took a backseat to the cold, hard logic of social and economic gain. For elite Roman families, marriage was a powerful tool for forging alliances. A strategic marriage could elevate a family's social standing, secure political influence, or consolidate wealth. If your father was a rising senator, he might arrange for you to marry the daughter of an established aristocratic family, hoping to gain their support and connections. Conversely, if your family was in decline, a wealthy marriage could provide much-needed financial stability. This meant that suitability was judged not on emotional connection, but on family background, social status, and financial assets. Imagine being a young man or woman in colonial America, where advantageous marriages among wealthy landowners or burgeoning merchants in cities like Boston, Massachusetts were often brokered for similar reasons of social and economic consolidation, though perhaps with a slightly greater nod to personal consent. The dowry was a central component of this contractual marriage. This was a payment or transfer of property from the bride's family to the groom's, intended to support the wife during the marriage and, theoretically, return to her if the marriage ended in divorce or her husband's death. The size of the dowry often reflected the social standing of the bride's family and could be a major negotiating point. A large dowry could make a less desirable bride more appealing, while a small one could be a significant obstacle to an advantageous match. For the bride's family, it was a substantial financial commitment, a significant investment in securing their daughter's future and furthering their family's ambitions. It's like a massive financial transaction accompanying a modern corporate merger, where the assets of one company are transferred to another, highlighting the economic rather than emotional basis of the union. A common historical truth is that Roman marriages, especially among the elite, were frequently arranged for social, political, or economic advantage rather than personal affection, with dowries playing a significant role in the contractual nature of the union. While love could develop within a marriage, it was not its primary purpose or a prerequisite for its formation. Historians still widely debate the extent to which emotional attachment was present or valued in typical Roman marriages across different social classes. As personal testimonies are rare and often colored by rhetorical conventions, making it challenging to generalize about the emotional experience of marriage for the broader population. For the young Roman woman, marriage often meant leaving her childhood home and entering a new household, where she was expected to quickly adapt to her husband's family and take on the responsibilities of paterfamilias, as we saw in Chapter 3. Her primary duty was to manage the domestic sphere and, crucially, to produce children, especially sons. Her fertility was paramount. Barrenness was a significant concern and could lead to divorce. The pressure to conceive and bear healthy heirs for the continuation of the family line, and to secure the father's dreams of legacy, a consistent theme throughout these chapters, was immense. Your body became, in essence, a vessel for the family's future, a biological imperative that often overshadowed any individual desires. It's a pressure far exceeding any modern expectation to have children, particularly in a society with vast reproductive choices. While the primary purpose was often practical, this doesn't mean that love and affection never existed in Roman marriages. Over time, some couples undoubtedly developed genuine bonds, affection, and mutual respect. Roman literature, particularly poetry, occasionally offers glimpses of deep marital love. However, these were often exceptions rather than the rule, or perhaps the idealized expressions of affection rather than the day-to-day reality. For many, marriage was a duty, a social obligation, and any affection that grew was a welcome bonus rather than a foundational requirement. Imagine marrying a stranger in a pre-arranged ceremony and then spending years learning to love them, a concept that feels alien to modern romantic sensibilities in a city like Los Angeles. California, divorce, while relatively easy compared to many later historical periods, particularly for men, further underscores the contractual nature of Roman marriage. A husband could often divorce his wife by simply sending her a notice, though by later periods the grounds for divorce became more regulated. While women also gained the right to initiate divorce, it was often more complicated for them due to their legal limitations and economic dependence. The ease of divorce meant that marriages could be dissolved if they no longer served their intended purpose if a new, more advantageous alliance presented itself. If a wife failed to produce heirs, or if political fortunes shifted. There was no social stigma comparable to divorce in Victorian England, but it highlighted that the union was fundamentally a practical arrangement, rather than an unbreakable sacred vow. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about marriage as contract love's absence is the curious phenomenon of the spouse's hidden charm, where, despite the arranged nature of Roman marriages, some individuals would secretly carry a small, personal charm, or amulet, often inscribed with a private symbol or a whispered hope for affection, given to them by a trusted friend or even a secret love from before their arranged union. A tiny, poignant act of clinging to personal desire and romantic longing in a world where such feelings were often sacrificed for practical considerations. Imagine yourself, a young Roman bride walking to your arranged wedding in a grand Roman temple. A silent, almost imperceptible silver charm hidden beneath your wedding veil. A token of a private wish for true love. Or perhaps a memento of a fleeting, forbidden affection. A silent rebellion against the contractual nature of your union. A truly heartbreaking and intimate secret. It truly sucked to have to hide your deepest romantic hopes and desires, carrying them as a secret burden in a society where marriage was a cold calculation, not a matter of the heart. The psychological impact of marriage as a contract was profound for both men and women. For women, it could mean a life devoid of personal fulfillment beyond domestic duties and childbearing, constantly striving to please a husband who might not have chosen her out of affection. For men, it meant a constant pressure to choose a spouse who would advance the family's interests, often sacrificing personal happiness for dynastic gain. The expectation was not for passionate love, but for dutiful partnership and efficient household management. This lack of emotional depth in the primary relationship of adulthood could lead to loneliness, resentment, or a search for affection outside the marriage. A reality often reflected in Roman poetry and satire. Children born of these contractual marriages often grew up in a household where parental affection might be present. But it was rarely the overt, demonstrative love we associate with modern family life. Parental roles were often divided: the father as the disciplinarian and authority figure. Remember childhood's harsh dawn from Chapter 2, and the mother as the manager of the household and primary caregiver, but still under the father's ultimate authority. The focus was on duty, discipline, and the perpetuation of the family name, rather than on fostering emotional bonds or personal happiness within the marital unit. Even the rituals and symbols of Roman marriage emphasized its practical and social functions. The confariatio ceremony, for the most traditional patrician families, involved a sacred cake and a solemn ritual, symbolizing the unbreakable bond, but also the transfer of the bride into the husband's full control. Later, more common forms of marriage involved simpler ceremonies, often little more than the joining of hands and a declaration of intent, followed by a procession to the groom's house. These rituals reinforce the contractual nature of the union, its legal and social implications, rather than celebrating personal love or emotional connection. The legacy of marriage as contract love's absence is a powerful reminder of the historical evolution of one of humanity's most fundamental institutions. It highlights how economic and social pressures have shaped and continue to shape the way we form relationships, and how the modern ideal of marriage based on love and personal choice is a relatively recent development, a hard-won freedom that was largely unattainable for many in the ancient world. This historical reality underscores the immense value we now place on individual happiness, emotional compatibility, and personal autonomy in our relationships. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps next to a loved one you chose freely and deeply, remember the cold calculations and pragmatic alliances that often defined Roman marriage, and appreciate the profound freedom to marry for love that you now possess. Let's gently return from the pragmatic, often emotionally distant world of marriage as contract love's absence, where unions were forged for alliances and heirs, not necessarily affection. If Chapter 4 explored the structural realities of partnerships, tonight we'll delve into an even darker, more pervasive aspect of Roman family life, one that casts a long, chilling shadow over every member of the household, the ubiquitous presence of human bondage. We're going to explore the grim, unyielding reality of shadows in the atrium slavery's pervasive presence, contemplating how the institution of slavery permeated every level of Roman society, shaping not just the lives of the enslaved, but also the daily experiences, economic realities, and moral fabric of the free Roman family, making it impossible to truly understand their lives without acknowledging the hidden suffering that supported their existence. Imagine yourself, now, a Roman citizen. Perhaps a young boy from a modest family in a bustling urban neighborhood like the Subura in Rome, or a comfortable household in a smaller, quieter town in ancient Gaul, or to bring it closer to an American context. Picture yourself as a child growing up on a large plantation in the pre-Civil War American South, where enslaved people were an undeniable, constant part of the landscape, affecting every aspect of life, from food on the table to the very architecture of the home. From your earliest memories, slaves are simply there. They cook your meals, clean your home, carry your messages, educate your children, and even attend to your personal hygiene. They are the invisible yet omnipresent engine of the Roman household. Their labor and lives completely at the disposal of the paterfamilias whose absolute power we explored in Chapter 1. This is the pervasive, often disturbing reality of shadows in the atrium slavery's pervasive presence, where the comforts of Roman life were built directly upon the foundation of human exploitation, turning every aspect of daily living into a chilling reminder of the utter lack of freedom for so many. Slavery in ancient Rome was not based on race, as it tragically became in later periods of American history. Instead, people became enslaved through conquest. Prisoners of war were a major source. Debt, piracy, or being born to an enslaved mother. This meant that enslaved people came from all corners of the vast Roman Empire, from Gaul to Egypt, from Greece to Britannia, bringing diverse cultures and skills into Roman households. This diversity, however, did not negate the fundamental brutality of their condition. Regardless of their origin, they were considered property, chattels, with no legal rights, no family ties recognized by law, and no claim to their own bodies or labor. They could be bought, sold, gifted, or inherited, just like any other possession. It's a chilling reminder of a time when the very concept of a human being was reduced to an item of commerce, a far cry from modern notions of universal human dignity. The sheer number of enslaved people in Roman society was staggering. In many wealthy households, particularly in major cities like Rome or the prosperous towns of Campania, enslaved individuals could number in the hundreds, performing every conceivable task. There were house slaves, cooks, cleaners, tutors, hairdressers, urban slaves, craftsmen, shopkeepers, administrators, rural slaves working vast agricultural estates or mines, and even public slaves working for the state on infrastructure projects. Their labor fueled the Roman economy, built its grand structures, produced its food, and provided its leisure. Imagine a city where nearly half the population, or even more in some periods, consisted of people who were legally owned by others. It's a foundational aspect of Roman life that is almost impossible to truly grasp from our modern perspective in, say, a bustling, free economy like that of Los Angeles. California, a common historical truth is that slavery was an endemic and deeply integrated institution in ancient Roman society, pervading every aspect of economic, social, and domestic life, with enslaved people constituting a significant portion of the population and performing a vast array of tasks. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological impact of living in a slave-owning society on free Romans, with some arguing it fostered cruelty and arrogance, while others emphasize the nuanced and often complex relationships that could develop between masters and slaves. Although these relationships never negated the fundamental power imbalance, the impact of slavery on the Roman family was profound and multifaceted. For the free children of the household, growing up surrounded by enslaved individuals performing every service meant they often learned to view human labor, and even human lives, as disposable. They were served, attended to, and educated by enslaved people, creating a class system from their earliest awareness. While some masters might have treated their enslaved people with a degree of benevolence, a topic hotly debated by historians, the inherent power imbalance meant that abuses were common and largely unpunished. Imagine a child growing up in a grand mansion in Newport, Rhode Island, in the 18th century, where every comfort, every meal, and every luxury was provided by enslaved labor, shaping their perception of social order from a tender age. For the paterfamilias, remember her silent burden from chapter 3. Managing the household meant managing a large staff of enslaved people. She would assign tasks, oversee their work, and ensure the smooth running of the domus. While this gave her significant domestic authority, it also meant she was constantly interacting with individuals who were legally her property, yet who were often highly skilled, educated, and resourceful. The relationship could be complex, ranging from a detached managerial role to one involving genuine emotional bonds, though always with the specter of absolute power hovering over it. The temptation to exploit, or the pressure to punish, was ever present, leading to countless instances of cruelty that would shock modern sensibilities. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about shadows in the atrium slavery's pervasive presence is the curious phenomenon of the lararium's secret offering, where, in some Roman households, enslaved individuals, despite having no legal recognition of their own deities or rituals, would secretly leave small personal offerings of food, flowers, or tiny votive figurines in inconspicuous corners of the household's lararium, the shrine to the household gods, turning a public display of Roman piety into a covert space for their own desperate prayers for freedom, protection, or the well-being of a secretly cherished family member, a silent act of spiritual defiance within the very heart of their master's homes. Imagine yourself, an enslaved cook in a senator's bustling kitchen in ancient Rome, pausing for a fleeting moment as you pass the glowing lararium, subtly placing a tiny, sun-dried fig or a withered flower from your meager garden at the base of the household god statues, whispering a silent prayer for your long-lost family in Britannia. A truly poignant act of hidden faith and enduring hope in a world designed to crush your spirit. It truly sucked to have to hide your own faith and prayers, turning your spiritual life into a constant, clandestine act within the very home that held you captive. The sheer unpredictability of an enslaved person's life was a constant source of fear and anxiety. They could be sold at any moment, separated from any nascent family they had formed, or transferred to harsher labor conditions in mines or rural estates. Punishment for disobedience, theft, or perceived insolence could range from flogging to branding, torture, or even execution. While the paterfamilias might have ultimate authority, the immediate oversight was often by overseers, sometimes themselves enslaved, whose cruelty could be boundless. This constant threat of violence and arbitrary punishment created a pervasive climate of fear, far more terrifying than any workplace stress experienced by a free person in modern society. Even the process of manumission, or freeing an enslaved person, was complex and often served the master's interests. A master might free an enslaved person as a reward for long service, or as a way to avoid supporting them in old age or illness. Freedmen and freedwomen gained certain legal rights, but were still often tied to their former masters as clients, owing them loyalty and services. While manumission offered a path to a degree of freedom and upward mobility, it was still ultimately at the discretion of the master, and the shadow of their former bondage lingered, a constant reminder of their past. The presence of slavery also had a profound, albeit often unacknowledged, impact on the moral and ethical fabric of Roman society. While Roman philosophers might discuss justice and virtue, the inherent contradiction of a society built on human bondage created a moral blind spot. The normalization of owning other human beings, the casual cruelty, and the widespread exploitation of labor undoubtedly shaped societal attitudes towards suffering, empathy, and the value of human life. This enduring legacy of dehumanization, though distant, still serves as a stark historical warning against systems that strip individuals of their fundamental rights. The psychological toll on the enslaved was immense. The constant threat of violence, the loss of family, the absence of autonomy, and the sheer degradation of being treated as property would have led to pervasive trauma, depression, and despair. While overt rebellion was rare and brutally suppressed, subtle forms of resistance like the whispers in the stone we saw in Chapter 8 in a different context were likely common feigned illness, sabotage, theft, and deliberate inefficiency. Their lives were a testament to the immense human capacity for endurance and the quiet refusal to be utterly broken, even when facing unimaginable oppression. The physical living conditions for many enslaved people, particularly those engaged in manual labor, were dire. Cramped, unsanitary living quarters, inadequate food making bread and blight from Chapter 5 even more severe, and relentless work far beyond the endless labor of a free craftsman from Chapter 1 meant that their lives were often short and brutal. Mortality rates for enslaved people, particularly in mines or large agricultural estates, were often higher than for the free population. A grim testament to the physical toll of their forced labor. The legacy of shadows. In the atrium, slavery's pervasive presence is a chilling and essential reminder of the darkest aspects of ancient societies and the profound, enduring consequences of human bondage. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the foundations of empires and the human cost of prosperity built on exploitation. This historical reality underscores the immense value we now place on freedom, equality, and the universal rights of every individual, principles that were utterly alien to the daily lives of countless people in ancient Rome. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps in a world where fundamental human rights are largely accepted, remember the silent suffering of those who lived in the shadows of the Roman Domus, and appreciate the hard-won freedom and dignity that you now possess. A freedom born from centuries of struggle against such pervasive exploitation. Let's gently return from the chilling and pervasive reality of shadows in the atrium slavery's pervasive presence, where the lives of countless individuals were reduced to mere property, fueling the Roman household and economy. If Chapter 5 explored the societal framework of bondage, tonight we'll narrow our focus to a particular, often immense burden within the free Roman family, the unyielding pressure placed upon the designated male heir. We're going to explore the quiet yet profound anxieties of heirs' heavy yoke succession and pressure, contemplating how the continuation of the family name, the preservation of wealth, and the upholding of dignitas rested almost entirely on the shoulders of one individual, turning his life into a demanding performance where failure was not an option, and personal desires were secondary to dynastic imperatives. Imagine yourself, now, a young Roman boy from a prominent family, perhaps growing up in a grand villa overlooking the sprawling city of Rome, or a comfortable estate in the rolling hills of Tuscany, or, to give it an American context, picture yourself as the eldest son of a powerful, dynastic family in early 20th century New England, destined to inherit the family business and maintain its social standing, with every aspect of your upbringing geared towards this singular purpose. From the moment your birth as a male child was recognized by the paterfamilias, whose absolute power we explored in Chapter 1, a heavy mantle was silently placed upon your tiny shoulders. You were the heir. Your existence was now inextricably linked to the survival and prosperity of the family name, its wealth, and its social standing. This isn't just about inheriting a fortune. It's about embodying the very future of your lineage. This is the pervasive, often suffocating reality of heirs' heavy yoke succession and pressure, where your entire life became a carefully choreographed performance, and the weight of your ancestors' expectations pressed down on your every choice, leaving little room for personal ambition beyond duty. Your education, even more so than that of your siblings, as discussed in childhood's harsh dawn in Chapter 2, was meticulously crafted to prepare you for this monumental task. While your sisters learned domestic skills, you, as the heir, were immersed in a rigorous curriculum designed for public life. This included not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also rhetoric, the art of public speaking, essential for political and legal careers. You'd spend countless hours memorizing speeches, practicing logical arguments, and studying Roman law and history. Your tutors, often highly educated Greek enslaved individuals, a chilling reminder of shadows in the atrium from Chapter 5, would push you relentlessly, For your success was their indirect validation. Imagine being a young man in Washington, D.C. today, knowing that your entire life is a training ground for a future political dynasty, with every moment scrutinized and every lesson carrying the weight of generational expectation. Your physical training was equally demanding. You were expected to be robust, capable of military service if called upon, and to possess the physical presence fitting for a Roman gentleman. This meant regular exercise, often involving running, riding, and combat training. It wasn't about being an athlete for sport, but about building a body capable of enduring the rigors of public life, whether on the battlefield or in the forum. Your health, already precarious given the limitations of Roman medicine, a hint of what's to come, was a crucial asset that had to be carefully maintained, as any weakness could jeopardize your future and the family's hopes. A common historical truth is that the eldest male heir in a Roman aristocratic family bore immense pressure to uphold the family's dignitas prestige and ensure the continuation of its lineage, often sacrificing personal desires for the sake of dynastic preservation. His upbringing was meticulously designed to prepare him for public life, military service, and efficient estate management. Historians still widely debate the psychological coping mechanisms employed by Roman heirs under such intense scrutiny and pressure, as direct personal accounts reflecting these inner struggles are rare, requiring inferences from prescriptive texts and observed behaviors. Perhaps one of the most oppressive aspects of the heir's life was the lack of personal choice in marriage. As we explored in Marriage as Contract Chapter 4, your union was almost certainly an arranged one, meticulously negotiated by your paterfamilias. Your future bride would be chosen for her dowry, her family connections, or her potential to bear healthy children, not for any personal affection. You might spend your entire adolescence knowing that your life partner had already been selected, with your own feelings irrelevant. This lack of romantic autonomy, this forced pragmatism in the most intimate of relationships, could lead to deep personal frustration or a search for affection outside the marital bond, a silent rebellion against the strictures of duty. It's like being told your entire future, including your personal life, has been pre-ordered and you have no say in the delivery. A concept that would send shivers down the spine of any young person in modern San Francisco. California. The constant scrutiny from your paterfamilias was relentless. He watched your every move, judged your every decision, and guided or dictated your every interaction. Until his death, you remained legally under his patria potestas, unable to truly own property, initiate legal proceedings, or make major life decisions independently. Even if you were a successful general or a renowned orator in his eyes, you were still his son, bound by his authority. This created a profound sense of delayed independence, a waiting game that could last for decades, leading to frustration and a longing for the freedom that only death could bring. Imagine being a successful, middle-aged executive in Atlanta, Georgia, still needing your father's permission to buy a new car or make a major investment, and feeling that weight of perpetual minorhood. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about heirs' heavy yoke succession and pressure is the curious phenomenon of the heir's secret scroll, where, in some Roman aristocratic households, a particularly burdened heir, feeling suffocated by the immense pressure to uphold the family name, would secretly compose private poems, philosophical musings, or even coded laments about his constrained life, carefully inscribed on small, perishable wax tablets or fragile papyrus scrolls, hidden away in a personal chest or within the folds of his toga, turning his artistic or intellectual endeavors into a profound, clandestine act of emotional release and self-expression, a rebellion against the stoic facade expected of him. Imagine yourself, a young Roman heir, in the quiet solitude of your room in a grand Roman villa, carefully unrolling a small papyrus scroll, penning a few lines of verse expressing your deep frustration with your arranged marriage, or your longing for a life of quiet scholarship instead of political ambition. Knowing that these private thoughts were your only true freedom, a truly poignant and subversive act of the soul. It truly sucked to have to hide your entire inner life, where even your creative outlet was a secret. Dangerous act of rebellion against the expectations that defined your very existence. The pressure to perform was not just about personal success. It was about the family's dignitas, its prestige, honor, and reputation. Any misstep, any scandal, any perceived failure on your part could bring shame upon the entire family name, potentially undoing generations of careful social climbing and political maneuvering. This meant that every public appearance, every speech in the forum, every military campaign was a high-stakes performance, with the weight of your ancestors' legacy resting on your shoulders. The fear of failure, the dread of disappointing your paterfamilias and your lineage, would have been a constant, gnawing anxiety, far more intense than any modern fear of academic or career failure. Furthermore, the heir often had the responsibility of managing the family's vast estates and wealth upon inheriting them. This was a complex task, requiring shrewd business sense, legal knowledge, and effective management of enslaved labor. Many heirs, despite their privileged upbringing, found themselves ill-equipped for these practical demands, leading to financial mismanagement, ruin, or further debt, which then brought shame upon the family. The transition from a life of intense study and social grooming to the realities of economic oversight was not always smooth, adding another layer of pressure and potential for failure. Even the death of the paterfamilias, while finally granting the heir his legal independence, brought its own profound burdens. Now, the full weight of the family's future rested solely on his shoulders. He inherited not just wealth, but also the responsibility for the entire household, including the continuation of the lineage, the care of his mother and unmarried sisters, and the management of all family affairs. This sudden transition from perpetual minor to absolute authority could be overwhelming, marking a new chapter of relentless duty rather than true freedom. The psychological impact of heir's heavy yoke was likely significant. Constant pressure, limited personal freedom, delayed independence, and the immense weight of expectation could lead to anxiety, depression, resentment, and a profound sense of isolation. While stoicism was admired, the internal struggle to maintain such a facade would have been immense. The heir, for all his privilege, was often trapped by the very advantages of his birth, his life predetermined by dynastic imperatives rather than personal desires. His journey was a lonely one, often devoid of genuine emotional support in a world that valued duty over individual well-being. The legacy of heir's heavy yoke. Succession and pressure is a powerful reminder of how cultural norms and societal structures can define and sometimes suffocate individual lives, even those born into privilege. It highlights the often unseen burdens carried by those at the top of social hierarchies, and the profound historical shift towards greater individual autonomy and the pursuit of personal happiness that we now largely take for granted. This historical reality underscores the immense value we place today on self-determination, the freedom to choose our own paths, and the right to define our own success, rather than merely inheriting the expectations of our ancestors. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps contemplating your own ambitions and dreams, remember the immense invisible yoke carried by the Roman heir, and appreciate the freedom you have to forge your own destiny. Unburdened by the crushing weight of an inherited legacy, let's gently return from the suffocating burden of heir's heavy yoke succession and pressure, where the weight of dynastic expectations silently shaped the lives of Roman male heirs. If Chapter 6 explored the anxieties of lineage and duty, tonight we'll delve into an even more fundamental and often terrifying aspect of Roman family life: the constant, invisible war against illness and the profound reliance on often futile remedies. We're going to explore the grim reality of sickness and superstition, perilous health, contemplating how endemic disease, poor sanitation, limited medical knowledge, and deeply ingrained superstitious beliefs made health a constant gamble, turning every cough, fever, or unexplained ailment into a potential harbinger of tragedy. bringing despair to every Roman household. Imagine yourself now, a Roman parent in a bustling insula apartment building in the crowded heart of Rome, or a rustic farmstead in the Italian countryside, or, to give it an American context, picture yourself as a parent in a pre-modern frontier settlement in colonial Ohio, where doctors were scarce. Sanitation was rudimentary, and folk remedies were your main defense against illness, or a rural community in the American South during a yellow fever outbreak. Facing an unseen enemy with limited scientific understanding, your child wakes with a fever, their body burning, their breathing ragged. Your heart seizes with fear, a dread that is all too familiar. You know, from painful experience, that even a common fever could quickly escalate, and that medical intervention, if available, would be rudimentary at best, and often dangerous. This is the pervasive, terrifying reality of sickness and superstition. Perilous health, where the threat of disease was a constant companion, and the desperate search for remedies often led down paths of unproven beliefs and agonizing uncertainty, turning every symptom into a silent prayer. Childhood was a particularly perilous time. As we briefly touched upon in Childhood's Harsh Dawn Chapter 2, infant and child mortality rates were astronomically high. Diseases like smallpox, measles, diphtheria, and dysentery, for which we now have effective vaccines or treatments, swept through Roman communities with devastating efficiency. These weren't isolated incidents, they were recurrent waves of sickness that could decimate families. Imagine the constant worry, the quiet desperation as you watched your children sicken, knowing there was little you could do beyond offering them basic comfort and invoking the gods. The concept of a child reaching adulthood was far from guaranteed, making every surviving child a precious yet vulnerable miracle. Sanitation, even in the grand cities, was a major culprit in the spread of disease. While Rome boasted impressive aqueducts that supplied clean water to some parts of the city and public baths, household hygiene was often poor. Waste disposal was rudimentary. Chamber pots were emptied into streets or communal pits, attracting vermin. Overcrowded living conditions in apartment blocks, especially for the poor, meant diseases could spread rapidly from one family to the next. Latrines, even in wealthier homes, were often unsanitary. The very air, particularly in summer, could carry the stench of waste and the invisible threat of contagion, far more potent than any unpleasant smell you might encounter in a modern city like New Orleans. Louisiana. A common historical truth is that disease, exacerbated by poor sanitation, limited medical knowledge, and overcrowding, was a pervasive threat to Roman families, leading to high mortality rates, particularly among infants and children. Roman medicine, while possessing some practical skills, was often ineffective against widespread infectious diseases and relied heavily on empirical observation, mixed with philosophical and superstitious beliefs. Historians still widely debate the precise efficacy of various Roman medical treatments, and the extent to which cultural beliefs in divine intervention influenced the actual practice of medicine among different social classes. As surviving medical texts often provide theoretical rather than practical daily applications, Roman medicine, while it had some admirable aspects like the development of surgical tools and the understanding of anatomy, largely through the dissection of animals, and occasionally gladiators, was severely limited against infectious diseases. There was no germ theory. They didn't understand that tiny, unseen organisms caused sickness. Instead, illness was often attributed to imbalances of humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, bad air miasma, divine displeasure, or even malevolent spirits. This meant that treatments were often ineffective or even harmful. Bloodletting, purging, herbal concoctions with questionable efficacy, and superstitious rituals were common responses to serious illness. Imagine being gravely ill and being offered a remedy that involved leeches, or a potion made from strange animal parts, hoping it would work, because it was all you had. The paterfamilias, whose absolute power we've seen throughout, from Chapter 1's Iron Hand to Chapter 6's heir's yoke bore the ultimate responsibility for the family's health. He would decide which doctor, if any, to consult, and which remedies to try. For wealthy families, Greek doctors, often enslaved, were highly sought after, bringing advanced for the time knowledge from the Hellenistic world. For poorer families, access to medical professionals was limited, and they often relied on folk remedies, wise women, or local healers, whose knowledge was a mix of practical herbs and deep-seated superstition. The vast disparity in access to care, and the quality of that care, further exacerbated the unequal chances of survival. Superstition played a huge role in dealing with illness. Romans, despite their practical nature, were deeply religious and believed in a pantheon of gods who could influence health. Temples dedicated to healing gods like Asclepius or his Roman equivalent. Aesculapius were popular pilgrimage sites, where the sick would sleep in hopes of receiving divine dreams that would guide their cure. Amulets, charms, and votive offerings were common practices, used to ward off evil spirits or secure divine favor for recovery. If a child fell ill, parents might frantically visit shrines, make vows, or perform household rituals, desperate for any intervention that might save their loved one. It's a bit like a modern parent in a rural community in Appalachia, resorting to traditional folk remedies and fervent prayer when mainstream medicine feels inaccessible or has failed, but with a far greater sense of pervasive life-or-death spiritual urgency, a fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about sickness and superstition. Perilous health is the curious phenomenon of the Garden of Sorrow, where in some Roman villas, particularly those with a history of child mortality, a paterfamilias, as we explored her burden in Chapter 3, would cultivate a small, secluded patch of garden filled with specific medicinal herbs known to ease symptoms or believed to ward off evil spirits, turning it into a private, almost sacred space where she would silently perform rituals or offer whispered prayers for the health of her children. A poignant blend of practical knowledge and desperate superstition. Imagine yourself, a Roman matron in a grand villa in Pompeii, kneeling amongst the rosemary, rue and poppies in a hidden corner of your courtyard garden, carefully crushing herbs to make a poultice for your feverish son, while simultaneously murmuring ancient incantations to ward off a mischievous spirit. Your face etched with fear and desperate hope. A truly intimate and powerful act of maternal devotion. It truly sucked to have to blend practical and often ineffective medicine with superstitious rituals, where your deepest love and fear for your children were intertwined with a desperate hope for divine intervention against an invisible and relentless enemy. The psychological impact of living with constant disease and the ever-present threat of death was immense. Grief was a familiar companion, as families frequently experience the loss of children, siblings, or parents. While public displays of emotion were often subdued, the private sorrow would have been profound, a contrast we'll explore further in Chapter 8. The constant anxiety about who would fall ill next, the powerlessness in the face of epidemics, and the reliance on uncertain remedies created a pervasive sense of despair and fatalism. This constant background hum of illness and vulnerability shaped their outlook on life, reminding them of its fragility far more intensely than any modern health scare, even for adult Romans. Chronic ailments were common. Arthritis from hard labor, lingering effects from childhood diseases, digestive issues from poor diet, recall the scarcity of bread and blight from Chapter 5, and injuries sustained in daily life were rarely fully healed. Pain was a constant companion for many, managed with primitive analgesics or simply endured with stoicism. Life expectancy was significantly lower than today, and the quality of life in one's later years could be severely diminished by a lifetime of physical strain and unaddressed health issues. The Roman military, with its large concentrations of men, was particularly vulnerable to epidemics, and campaigns were often decided as much by disease as by battle. The knowledge gained from treating soldiers, however, did contribute to some advancements in trauma care and battlefield surgery, but these were often specific to injuries rather than systemic illnesses. the widespread public health initiatives we take for granted today, clean water systems, waste management, public sanitation, widespread vaccination programs were centuries away, leaving Roman families largely at the mercy of nature's unseen forces. The legacy of sickness and superstition. Perilous health is a stark and humbling reminder of humanity's long struggle against disease and the profound impact of scientific advancement on human well-being. It highlights the immense value we now place on public health, preventative medicine, advanced medical care, and the scientific understanding of illness. This historical reality underscores the monumental progress we have made in conquering diseases that once decimated populations and provides a profound context for appreciating the relative comfort and safety of our modern lives. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling a minor sniffle or a slight ache that you know will pass, remember the constant, terrifying struggle against unseen illness in ancient Rome, and appreciate the immense privilege of living in a world where good health is, for many, a reasonable expectation rather than a desperate, superstitious prayer. Let's gently return from the terrifying, constant battle against sickness and superstition. Perilous health, where disease was a pervasive threat and remedies were often futile. If Chapter 7 explored the physical vulnerability of the Roman family, tonight we'll delve into a more nuanced, yet equally profound, aspect of their lives, the intricate dance between their deeply private sorrows and joys, and the rigid demands of public decorum. We're going to explore the often contradictory reality of public face. Private pain appearance over reality, contemplating how Roman society's intense focus on dignitas prestige and fama reputation forced families to maintain a carefully constructed facade of unity and stoicism, often at the expense of genuine emotional expression and individual well-being, turning their most profound experiences into silent, hidden struggles. Imagine yourself, now, a prominent Roman citizen, perhaps a senator or a wealthy merchant, not openly sharing your joys and sorrows with friends on social media in a vibrant city like Nashville, Tennessee, but instead carefully orchestrating your public persona in the bustling forum. Or, to give it an American context, picture yourself as a powerful political figure in 19th century Washington, D.C., where maintaining a pristine public image, even amidst private turmoil, was paramount. Or a prominent Southern family during the Victorian era, strictly adhering to social conventions regardless of inner feelings. Your family has just suffered a devastating loss. Perhaps a beloved child succumbed to an unseen illness, that grim reality from Chapter 7, or a significant financial setback has threatened your livelihood. Yet, as you step out of your domus into the vibrant Roman street, your face is composed, your demeanor calm, and your toga perfectly draped. No hint of the gnawing grief or anxiety is permitted to show. This is the pervasive, often heartbreaking, reality of public face, private pain appearance. Over reality, where the relentless pressure to maintain an impeccable social standing forced individuals to become masterful actors, burying their deepest emotions beneath a veneer of unwavering stoicism, making every public interaction a performance, and every private moment a hidden burden. The concept of dignitas prestige or honor and fama reputation was paramount in Roman society. For a Roman man, his dignitas was his most valuable asset, earned through military service, political office, and public service, but also meticulously maintained through his conduct and the conduct of his family. Any perceived weakness, any public display of excessive emotion, or any scandal could severely damage his and his family's reputation, leading to social ostracism, political ruin, and financial hardship. This pressure meant that men, especially, were expected to be stoic, rational, and in control of their emotions at all times. A far cry from the modern emphasis on emotional vulnerability and open communication that you might find in, say, a modern therapy session in Los Angeles, California. For the Roman woman, her dignitas was intrinsically linked to that of her husband and father. As we explored in Matron's Silent Burden Chapter 3, her role was to manage the household efficiently, bear legitimate children, and maintain an impeccable reputation for modesty and virtue. Any gossip, any hint of impropriety, could bring immense shame upon the entire family, potentially leading to divorce or social ruin. This meant that women were often even more constrained in their emotional expression and public behavior, constantly aware that their actions reflected directly on the male members of their family. It's like living under constant surveillance, where every gesture, every word, could be misinterpreted and used to undermine your family's standing. A pressure far exceeding any public scrutiny faced by modern public figures. A common historical truth is that Roman society placed immense value on dignitas and fama, compelling individuals, particularly from elite families, to maintain a public facade of stoicism, decorum, and strength, often suppressing personal emotions and private struggles to preserve their family's honor and social standing. Historians still widely debate the long-term psychological consequences of such pervasive emotional repression on Roman individuals and the extent to which private emotional outlets, if any, compensated for this public restraint. Consider the reality of grief. In a society with high mortality rates, remember sickness and superstition from Chapter 7. Death was a frequent visitor, while funeral rites were public and often elaborate, involving processions, eulogies, and professional mourners. The period of intense, overt mourning was often prescribed and limited. After the initial rituals, individuals were expected to resume their public duties and maintain a composed demeanor. The prolonged, visible display of personal sorrow was often seen as weakness or self-indulgence, detracting from one's dignitas. Imagine losing a beloved child or a spouse you had grown to care for, even if your marriage was contract, as in Chapter 4, and being expected to quickly resume your social obligations, burying your profound sadness deep within. This internal struggle to reconcile immense personal pain with outward composure was a heavy burden, far more isolating than grieving in a supportive community in modern Portland. Oregon, even joy and celebration had their limits. While Romans enjoyed feasts, games, and public spectacles, excessive or uncontrolled displays of personal happiness were often viewed with suspicion, perhaps as boastful or undignified. Laughter was appropriate, but boisterous revelry was often reserved for specific festivals or private moments. The emphasis was on restrained enjoyment, a dignified appreciation rather than uninhibited exuberance. This subtle suppression of even positive emotions contributed to the overall emotional constriction of Roman life, making every feeling a carefully managed performance. It's a bit like a perpetual high society dinner party, where you must always maintain a perfect posture and polite smile. Even if you're bursting with happiness or struggling with inner turmoil, a fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about public face. Private pain appearance. Over reality is the curious phenomenon of the tabula secreta secret tablet, where in some Roman households, individuals, particularly those under immense social pressure, would keep a small, private wax tablet, often hidden within a locked chest or a secret compartment in their domus, on which they would briefly inscribe their true, unfiltered thoughts, anxieties, or even fleeting moments of unapproved joy or raw, unedited diary of their inner world, immediately smoothed over after each entry, leaving no permanent record but providing a crucial, momentary outlet for emotional expression that was utterly forbidden in public. Imagine yourself, a high-ranking Roman official, after a grueling day in the forum where you had to maintain a rigid, emotionless facade, retreating to your private study, pulling out a small wax tablet, and quickly, furiously scratching out a few lines expressing your contempt for a political rival, or your despair over a family illness, only to smooth the wax-clean moments later, leaving no trace. A truly poignant act of fleeting, yet vital self-expression. It truly sucked to have to erase your own raw emotions as soon as they were expressed, making your deepest feelings ephemeral and leaving no physical record of your true inner turmoil. The domestic sphere, while seemingly a private refuge, was also permeated by the demands of public appearance. The very layout of the Roman domus, with its public atrium where clients would gather, and its more private inner rooms, reflected this duality. Even within the home, a Roman family was often on display to clients, freedmen, and enslaved individuals, a constant reminder of shadows in the atrium from chapter 5. This meant that even supposedly private moments could be witnessed, further reinforcing the need for constant decorum. There was little concept of alone time or true personal space as we understand it today in a sprawling home in a modern American suburb. For children, this pressure began early. As we saw in Childhood's Harsh Dawn, Chapter 2, they were taught to be disciplined and obedient. Public tantrums or emotional outbursts were met with swift disapproval and often physical punishment. They learned to internalize their feelings, to project an image of respectful composure, setting the stage for a lifetime of emotional restraint. This early conditioning meant that genuine, uninhibited emotional expression was rarely practiced and often felt alien. The psychological toll of living this dual existence, of constantly presenting a false front to the world, would have been immense. Chronic stress, anxiety, and a sense of alienation from one's true self were likely common. The absence of healthy emotional outlets could lead to internal turmoil, potentially manifesting in physical ailments connecting back to sickness and superstition from Chapter 7, or destructive behaviors in private. The individual was constantly evaluating how their actions and feelings would be perceived, turning every interaction into a calculated performance, even the acts of whispers in the stone's subtle resistance from Chapter 8. But here we see a Roman parallel, like gossip or hidden resentments, were often a private way to cope with this public pressure. These informal channels allowed individuals to express emotions that were otherwise forbidden, creating a hidden emotional landscape beneath the polished surface of Roman society. These were the safety valves, the secret avenues for authentic feeling, even if they were dangerous and had to remain hidden. The public image also heavily influenced the heir's heavy yoke. Chapter 6. His entire upbringing was geared towards being the perfect embodiment of the family's dignitas. Capable of carrying its legacy, any perceived flaw, any hint of weakness in his character or public performance would be a catastrophic blow to the family's aspirations. This made his life a relentless public examination, where his inner struggles were irrelevant compared to his outward presentation. The legacy of public face. Private pain appearance over reality is a powerful reminder of how intensely social pressures can shape human behavior and emotion. It highlights the profound historical shift towards valuing individual authenticity, emotional well-being, and the freedom to express one's true self, which are increasingly prioritized in modern Western societies. This historical reality underscores the immense privilege of living in a world where you are largely free to be yourself, to experience and express a full range of emotions, and to seek support for your inner struggles without fear of social ruin. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling the relief of having openly shared a feeling or authentically connected with a loved one, remember the silent struggles beneath the carefully constructed facades of ancient Rome, and appreciate the freedom you have to live a life of greater emotional integrity. Let's gently return from the constrained world of public face, private pain appearance over reality, where Roman families meticulously crafted their external image while often burying their inner turmoil. If Chapter 8 explored the demands of public decorum, tonight we'll delve into the quiet, often overlooked, ways individuals within that rigid system found moments of solace, connection, and a subtle reclaiming of their humanity. We're going to explore the poignant reality of echoes in the villa enduring resilience, contemplating how, despite absolute patriarchal power, perilous health, economic constraints, and societal expectations, Romans found subtle personal ways to navigate their difficult lives, asserting their dignity and forging genuine bonds that allowed them to survive, and sometimes even thrive, within a system designed to control every aspect of their existence. Imagine yourself, now, a middle-aged Roman woman in your domus in ancient Rome, perhaps overseeing the bustling activities of your household, a role we discussed in Matron's silent burden in Chapter 3, or a busy merchant in the heart of Ostia, the port city, or to give it an American context, Picture yourself as a resourceful homesteader in the challenging American West of the 19th century, finding strength and community amidst hardship, or an immigrant family in a crowded tenement in turn-of-the-century New York City, creating a vibrant inner world despite external pressures. You live under the unyielding authority of the paterfamilias. Remember his iron hand from Chapter 1, and you've endured the harsh dawn of childhood. Chapter 2, the pragmatic realities of marriage as contract. Chapter 4, and the pervasive shadows in the atrium of slavery. Chapter 5, you've seen loved ones succumb to perilous health. Chapter 7, and learn to maintain a public face. Chapter 8, regardless of private sorrow. Yet, amidst all this, you find moments of unexpected grace, tiny pockets of genuine connection, and quiet ways to assert your individual spirit. This is the pervasive, uplifting reality of Echoes in the Villa Enduring Resilience, where the human spirit, with its innate capacity for adaptation and connection, found solace and strength even within the most rigid and demanding societal structures, turning small acts of daily living into quiet triumphs of the human will. One of the most powerful forms of resilience lay in informal networks and friendships. While formal social structures were rigid, Romans, like people everywhere, formed deep personal bonds. These friendships, often cultivated from childhood or through shared experiences in military service, business, or political life, provided crucial emotional support and practical assistance. Men might gather at the baths or in taverns, sharing gossip, political opinions, and personal woes, finding solace in shared experience. Women, though more confined to the domestic sphere, formed bonds with female relatives, neighbors, and even trusted enslaved confidants, sharing advice on household management, child-rearing, and navigating the complexities of their marriages. These informal networks offered a crucial escape valve from the pressures of public life and familial hierarchy, creating a sense of belonging and mutual aid that transcended formal social divisions. It's like a secret support group forming in the shadows of a highly structured corporation, offering emotional relief and practical advice outside the official channels. Far more vital than a casual modern coffee shop chat, another powerful aspect of resilience was the cultivation of an inner life. In a world where outward emotional expression was constrained, many Romans turned inward. This could manifest in intellectual pursuits, reading philosophy, writing poetry. Remember the heir's secret scroll from Chapter 6, or engaging in private study. For others, it might be spiritual devotion, a deep personal connection to a deity or philosophical school that offered solace and meaning beyond the demands of daily life. This rich inner world provided a refuge from external pressures, a space where individual thoughts and feelings could exist freely, unjudged by the rigid societal norms. Imagine a quiet evening in a bustling Roman insula, a scholar poring over a philosophical text by the dim light of an oil lamp, finding profound peace and intellectual freedom in the solitude of his mind. A luxury denied to the constant demands of public life. A common historical truth is that, despite the rigid social structures and often harsh realities of Roman life, individuals found numerous ways to cope and exhibit resilience, forming strong informal networks, cultivating rich inner lives, and adapting their traditions to navigate challenging circumstances. Historians still widely debate the extent to which these personal coping mechanisms genuinely mitigated the oppressive aspects of Roman society versus merely allowing individuals to endure them, as the balance between adaptation and inherent suffering remains a complex area of inquiry. Adaptation and ingenuity in daily life were also crucial. Romans were incredibly practical, and they found ingenious ways to make their lives work within the existing constraints. Whether it was devising new agricultural techniques to maximize yields, developing more efficient building methods, or creating complex water systems, their resilience was often expressed through their ability to innovate and problem solve. Even within the household, the paterfamilias demonstrated incredible resourcefulness in managing a large staff of enslaved people and provisions, stretching resources and maintaining order amidst chaos. This practical ingenuity was not just about survival, it was an assertion of human capability and a quiet triumph over limitations. It's like a modern family in a rural, off-grid community in Montana, learning to creatively solve problems and adapt to challenging conditions, finding a sense of pride in their self-sufficiency. The love for children, despite the high mortality rates and strict discipline, was undeniably a source of resilience. While expressions of parental affection might have differed from modern norms, archaeological evidence like toys found in graves and literary accounts confirm profound bonds between parents and children. The joy of a child's birth, the hope for their future even under the heir's heavy yoke, and the comfort derived from their presence provided a powerful emotional anchor amidst hardship. These deep familial bonds, often forged in the crucible of shared challenges, offered a vital sense of meaning and purpose, even if they were tinged with the constant fear of loss. It's a universal human experience that transcends time and culture, connecting every parent across millennia. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about echoes in the villa enduring resilience is the curious phenomenon of the Garden of Whispered Secrets, where, in wealthier Roman domuses, the peristyle garden, usually a public-facing space, would sometimes feature a secluded, often overgrown alcove or a hidden bench, intentionally designed to be just out of sight and earshot from the main thoroughfares, becoming a private, unofficial sanctuary where family members, the paterfamilias, seeking solace. A burdened heir confessing his anxieties, or even trusted enslaved individuals sharing whispered hopes, could briefly escape the watchful eyes of the household and share their true feelings without fear of public judgment. Turning a structured architectural element into a vital, emotional escape, imagine yourself, a Roman matron, retreating to a shadowy corner of your sprawling peristyle garden, the scent of roses and cypress filling the air, and for a fleeting moment, allowing your meticulously maintained public face to crumble. As you whisper your true anxieties about your child's perilous health to a trusted enslaved confidant, finding a rare moment of genuine emotional release in this secret, hallowed space, it truly sucked to have to find such a hidden, semi-private space within your own home just to express your genuine emotions. Turning your beautiful garden into a secret confessional, shared rituals and communal life also fostered resilience. Religious festivals, public games, and family gatherings, even if for contractual marriages, provided opportunities for collective experience and a temporary reprieve from individual burdens. The shared belief in the gods, the communal celebration of victories, and the rituals surrounding life's milestones, births, marriages, deaths created a sense of belonging to something larger than oneself. This collective identity provided strength and a framework for understanding and enduring life's inevitable challenges. It's like the shared sense of community and tradition in a small town in rural Minnesota, where communal events and long-standing rituals bind people together through good times and bad. Even the presence of enslaved people, while a profound moral failing, could sometimes foster unexpected bonds. While the power dynamic was undeniable and abuse was rampant, some enslaved individuals became deeply trusted members of the household, acting as tutors, confidants, or managers. Their presence, despite their bondage, could contribute to the resilience of the family as a whole, providing essential labor, skills, and sometimes even emotional support that helped the free family unit navigate its own stresses. This complex reality, while never excusing the institution of slavery, speaks to the nuanced and often contradictory nature of human relationships, even under the most oppressive circumstances. The very acts of subtle resistance, as we explored in Chapter 8 in the context of cathedral builders, but equally applicable here within the Roman household, the tiny acts of defiance. The hidden expressions of individuality were forms of resilience. The apprentice's hidden signature or the quiet acts of sabotage by enslaved individuals were not just acts of rebellion. They were acts of self-preservation, ways to maintain a sense of agency and dignity in a system that sought to strip it away. These small, private triumphs kept the spirit alive, allowing individuals to endure and to pass on a flicker of hope to the next generation. The legacy of echoes in the villa. Enduring resilience is a testament to the indomitable nature of the human spirit. It reminds us that even in the most rigid, challenging, and often cruel historical contexts, people found ways to cope, to connect, and to assert their humanity. It highlights the enduring power of personal relationships, inner strength, adaptation, and the subtle, often unseen, acts of defiance that allow individuals to navigate and survive oppressive systems. This historical reality underscores the universal human capacity for perseverance and provides a profound context for appreciating the strength we draw from our own communities, our personal beliefs, and our quiet acts of self-preservation in the face of modern challenges. As you drift off to sleep tonight, perhaps feeling a sense of connection to your own loved ones, or drawing strength from your own inner peace, remember the quiet echoes of resilience in the ancient Roman villa, and the enduring human spirit that allowed families to not just survive, but to truly live amidst their profound realities. Let's gently return from the quiet strength and adaptability found in echoes in the villa enduring resilience, where Roman families, despite immense pressures, found ways to connect, cope, and assert their humanity. If Chapter 9 explored their survival strategies, tonight we'll finally step out of the ancient Roman domus and into our own modern lives, reflecting on how those harsh realities silently shaped the comfortable freedoms we now take for granted. We're going to explore modern reflections, our inherited freedoms, contemplating the profound, often unacknowledged, legacy of an era of immense hardship that underpins so many of the conveniences, rights, and comforts of our daily existence. From the very structure of our families to the fundamental notion of individual liberty, imagine yourself now, winding down your evening in your own home in a peaceful suburb of Sacramento, California, or your cozy apartment in a vibrant city like Atlanta, Georgia. The lights are soft. Perhaps the gentle hum of your air conditioning fills the room. You've had a long day, perhaps a busy one at work, or a relaxed one at home, and you're looking forward to simply being yourself, making your own choices, and enjoying the company of your loved ones. You might think nothing of it as you decide what to eat for dinner, or freely choose how to spend your leisure time. You likely take for granted that your children will grow up safe, healthy, and largely free to pursue their own paths. This is the profound, yet often unacknowledged, reality of modern reflections. Our inherited freedoms, where the very structure of our society, the rights we hold dear, and the personal liberties we cherish, were forged through centuries of human struggle against the kind of constraints that defined family life in ancient Rome. Building a foundation of comfort and safety we rarely pause to appreciate. Think back to the absolute, unyielding grip of the paterfamilias and his iron hand, our starting point in Chapter 1. Remember how your very life, your property, your career, and even your marriage were subject to his arbitrary will. Now, consider your own autonomy. You have the right to make your own decisions, to pursue your own education, to choose your own career, to own property in your own name, and to marry for love, not for political or economic gain. A stark contrast to marriage as contract from Chapter 4. The very concept of individual rights, of being sui juris, your own master from adulthood, is a direct inheritance from the long, slow, often painful erosion of such absolute patriarchal power. Every time you cast a vote, sign a contract, or simply choose what to wear, you are exercising freedoms that were utterly unimaginable for most Romans. It's like living in a world where everyone has finally been handed the keys to their own life. After centuries of being locked in a cage, and the sheer joy of that empowerment is palpable in every free choice you make. Consider the terrifying reality of childhood's harsh dawn, that grim picture from Chapter 2. Remember the astronomical infant mortality rates, the brutal physical discipline, and the early relentless push into adult responsibilities. Now, appreciate the safety nets and protections that surround modern children. The miracle of modern medicine, which has moved far beyond sickness and superstition from Chapter 7. With vaccines and antibiotics that save countless lives, the legal frameworks that protect children from abuse and neglect, the concept of a prolonged, carefree childhood filled with play, exploration, and education designed for personal growth, rather than just dutiful preparation. Every school bus that picks up children in a quiet suburban street in Minneapolis, Minnesota, every pediatrician's office, every playground in a city park, is a silent monument to the millions of Roman children who never had such a protected beginning. The matron's silent burden. Chapter 3. The Roman woman confined by domesticity, legally subordinate. Her worth often defined solely by her ability to produce heirs. Now, reflect on the incredible strides in gender equality. Women today have the right to pursue any career, own property independently, participate fully in politics and public life, initiate divorce, and make choices about their own bodies and families. The very idea of a woman being legally considered the property of her father or husband is repugnant to modern sensibilities. Your ability to live a life defined by your own ambitions and talents, regardless of gender, is a profound freedom that was hard-won over millennia. A liberation that would have been an unimaginable dream for a Roman paterfamilias. And the chilling shadows. In the atrium, slavery's pervasive presence, that pervasive horror from Chapter 5. While sadly not eradicated globally, the abolition of slavery in most modern nations and the universal condemnation of human bondage represents one of humanity's greatest moral advancements. The fundamental right to freedom, to own oneself, to control one's own labor and body, these are now foundational principles of international law and human dignity. Every time you engage in free labor, enter into a voluntary contract, or simply walk down the street as a free individual in a bustling American city like New York City, you are living a reality built on the immense, often forgotten, struggles against the dehumanization of slavery. The very concept of universal human rights, applicable to everyone regardless of birth or origin, is a direct counterpoint to the brutal realities of Roman bondage, the anxieties of the heir's heavy yoke. Chapter 6 also resonate deeply with our modern experience of personal choice. While inherited wealth and privilege still exist, the pressure to conform to a preordained destiny, to sacrifice personal desires for dynastic imperatives, is significantly lessened for most individuals today. You have the freedom to choose your own path, to define your own success, to pursue your own passions, and to build your own legacy, rather than simply inheriting and maintaining one. The modern emphasis on individual fulfillment, on crafting a unique life story, stands in stark contrast to the rigid, predetermined paths of Roman heirs, allowing you a personal freedom that was once the exclusive domain of only a few, if any, even among the elite. Even the need to maintain a public face. Private pain. Chapter 8 has evolved. While social expectations still exist, there is a far greater acceptance of emotional expression, mental health awareness, and the freedom to be authentic. You can grieve openly, celebrate exuberantly, seek professional help for emotional struggles, and share your vulnerabilities with trusted friends and family without fear of social ruin. The expectation of constant stoicism has largely given way to an understanding of human complexity and the importance of emotional well-being. The very idea of having a vibrant inner life that you can and are encouraged to share rather than meticulously hide is a profound liberation, connecting you more authentically with your own emotions and with others. A common historical truth is that the cumulative hardships and constrained freedoms of ancient Roman family life, while enduring for centuries, ultimately contributed to the slow, evolutionary development of legal rights, individual liberties, and social reforms that are fundamental to modern Western societies. These awful realities inadvertently served as a historical contrast, highlighting the value of personal autonomy, child welfare, gender equality, and human rights that we now largely take for granted. Historians still widely debate the precise mechanisms and timescales through which these ancient societal structures directly influence specific modern advancements. As social progress is a complex, multifaceted process with numerous contributing factors over millennia, a fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about modern reflections. Our inherited freedoms is the curious phenomenon of the digital lararium, where, unknowingly, many modern individuals recreate a highly personal, quasi-sacred space online, often through curated social media feeds or private digital albums, sharing carefully selected moments of family life, personal triumphs, or even quiet reflections, seeking validation and connection in a way that echoes the Roman lararium, the household shrine. A public-facing display of family piety and ancestral pride, yet paradoxically allows for both a new form of public face and a controlled, self-expressed private world, bridging the ancient need for familial display with the modern yearning for individual narrative. Imagine yourself scrolling through your carefully curated social media feed, posting a picture of your children at a happy event or a quiet moment of reflection, feeling a subtle sense of connection and validation, unaware that you are, in a very modern way, engaging in an act that echoes the ancient Roman practice of publicly honoring your family and ancestors. But now, with the added layers of personal choice and a global audience, a truly fascinating blend of ancient human needs and modern technological expression. It truly sucks that even with all our modern freedom, we still find ourselves performing for an audience, albeit a digital one, feeling the subtle pressure to curate our lives for public consumption. A distant echo of the Roman need for dignitas. And finally, the echoes in the villa. Enduring resilience. Chapter 9. The quiet ways Romans found solace and strength. Your ability to connect with friends and family freely, to pursue personal hobbies and intellectual interests without fear of judgment, to find spiritual meaning in diverse ways, and to live in communities that prioritize mutual aid and human dignity. These are the very freedoms born from millennia of human resilience. The informal networks and private rebellions of the past have evolved into formal rights and widespread societal values, allowing you to not just endure, but to genuinely flourish. So, as you lay in your own bed tonight, surrounded by the myriad comforts and freedoms of your modern life, take a moment to breathe deeply, to feel the safety of your home, the peace in your heart, and the incredible privilege of simply being yourself. These aren't just material possessions or abstract rights. They are echoes. Echoes of silent struggles, of constrained lives, of profound sacrifices, and of persistent human yearning for dignity and freedom. They are the quiet legacy of the awful reality of family life in ancient Rome. Let this understanding wash over you. Feel the quiet hum of your modern world, a world built on the foundations laid by countless, often unseen, acts of perseverance and sacrifice from those who came before. Rest easy, knowing that while the human journey is complex and often arduous, the spirit of adaptation and of resilience, even in its most challenging forms, is an ancient, powerful part of who we are. It's the hidden strength that binds us to our ancestors, a gentle reminder that even in the darkest corners of history, human ingenuity and will always find a way to leave their indelible, yet often unseen, mark.